Greetings, brothers. As we've evolved in this space where black men have been able to congregate and share their perspectives on life, many of us have come to realize that the life that we have always idealized for ourselves growing up, the life that we had always been taught will be the life for us in many ways, is now an improbable and distant thought buried somewhere under the ocean's floor. For many of us, we've been struggling with the realities of how life looks in the long run. You see, we've become, at the very least, apprehensive to some of us being starkly opposed to embracing some common societal ideas, such as the idea of marriage, of having children, or even in sharing relationships at all. Many of us have had a change in viewpoint when it comes to the realm of religion and spirituality, where once we may have looked at such as a foundation for governing our lives, and now we must navigate with our own moral compass, where we are both judge and jury in the cases of our daily affairs. We turned away from embracing many societal norms, and we view them as being unharmonious with our own principles. We shun so many ways of this world, and in many ways, we become alienated. And we've also alienated ourselves. And when we gloss over the years, looking back over our past, many of us have always known that something wasn't quite right about our living experience. We just never really felt truly comfortable here. When we think about the smiling faces of our associates, friends that we've had over the years, and family members, we wonder, what is there really to smile about when life constantly throws tragedy at you? When people constantly disappoint you? When life constantly creates trouble for you? When you just know that there's a seemingly irremovable thorn in your side, causing some sort of displeasure, some sort of discomfort. And even when some days are better than others, even when some time periods in life are more fruitful than others, somewhere, not even having to make it all the way to the back of our minds, we know that it's only a matter of time before something goes wrong. This constant experience has led to a vexation on our souls, where we feel a tug of war of sorts on our spirits. One pushing us to move into the realm of possibility from uncharted territories that can await us on the other side, and the other pulling us back to the grim realities that no matter how far we go, that no matter what we do, when it's all said and done, we know that something about this place does not ultimately gel with our spirit. We've never really liked it much here. And when we look at the masses, we get the feeling that perhaps we're just one of those people that weren't designed to be a part of this. This being life constantly playing a game with us. Some sort of a sick, sophomoric joke. and the bitterness that is accumulated from the pain, from the betrayals, and the anguish that we experience are our most reliable companions. We question the merit of our resiliency, knowing that anyone can push forward through devastation. But what are we pushing forward for? All for a composition of lessons, very taxing and very expensive lessons that we could have done without to get to the same moral of the story. And yet even our avoidance of such experienced lessons will cost us in other ways. Understanding that all that we accumulate will mean nothing once the lights go out. And that we have no control over these monuments that we're building for ourselves that we plan to leave behind, hoping only that they will be best utilized for worthwhile purposes, our own brand of legacy of sorts. Sometimes we may think back to when our parents were our age and where they were in life at our present age. Perhaps when your parents were at the age that you are now, maybe they had you and perhaps another sibling or two at least. They may have been paying a mortgage on a home. Perhaps they had been married for some years, and they had already established themselves firmly into some form of an occupation. And they also had a host of friends and associates through their place of worship, through their career field, the neighborhood, and other networks. And for some of us, when we compare where our lives are now to where theirs was then, in some instances, we may determine that we are further along in many areas, but in many cases, we feel dramatically behind. Our peers give us another reminder, the ones whom we've grown up with. They can oftentimes provide us with a firm reminder of the swift passing of time, as we examine how most of them have children by now, many times who are now adults. And we're frequently asked about when we're going to settle down, or if we see parenthood on the horizon, or if there's at least a special someone in our life. And in our response, we might be somewhat casual, neither conforming nor denying much about anything. And while we of course know that there's more to life than love and romance and having a family, and while we're very proud of evolving into our financial, intellectual, and spiritual estates, there is a tension that can be present on our hearts from time to time, because we also recognize that we don't fit the mold of what has been marketed to us throughout our life by society at large. And as we take a look into the future, and particularly look at the 6th and 7th decades and beyond of our lives and what that'll look like, what that's going to feel like, realizing that in this season, life slows down, and that this time will indeed be upon us soon enough. And sometimes we think back from a memory from decades ago, and at times that memory may seem like it's ancient history. And then on another day, we might look back at that same exact memory and it feels as though it wasn't too long ago at all. And what we determine is that life can be long, but time itself is very short. And when we look at the time in the near future, we often envision ourselves in our own home by ourselves. Maybe we see ourselves in a high-rise condominium with oceanic views, and where the horns and the festivities and the seagulls on the boulevard give constant reminder to the sort of life that in many ways we've avoided. Perhaps when we look at our home in the future, we've selected a modest home with much less space than we can actually afford, knowing that we can have something much more luxurious, much more stately, much more square feet in acreage, possibly for as far as the eye can see. But some of us have realized that a much larger occupancy can also remind us of the rooms that we never filled with warm memories in the flesh. And they instead house our accomplishments of yesteryear. And we realize that the excess space is like a big hole in our heart over what could have been had life been different. In our yards, perhaps in a home somewhere down south. Our yards are graced with weeping willow trees, where the sound of them swaying to and fro from the strong breeze right before the heavy rainstorm play like chimes to our life's experience. And we can't help but wonder, how long does life allow for men who live in a state like this? The men that passed on the family gatherings over all the years, not wanting to deal with the nonsense that they were accustomed to dealing with within their upbringing. The men who heard of the birth of a second cousin in the family, but they know that if that cousin was walking down the street right past them and looked them in the face, they wouldn't know them from Adam, even though they grew up with their same parents. The men who avoided the crowd and who largely live life through the seams. And we sit back and we wonder what life may have been like had we just taken a different chance. Had we let our guard down a bit. Knowing that in many ways we live this way to avoid anguish. However, even experiencing the unforeseen occurrences, as burdensome as they are, they still would have given us something to show for many of our experiences. You see, many brothers know that there is a disconnect in their lives. And this holiday season is a reminder of such. And whether we celebrate them or not, as I do not personally, many of us still know that if we were to die today in our sleep, that we may not be found for weeks, or even months after the fact. Not because there's no one who knows where we live, but because we know that we truly don't belong in any particular circle. So the first sign of our demise might be by an employer who's a bit concerned over this unusual stream of no-call, no-shows, leaving voicemail after voicemail. Perhaps this is the first time that our phone has even rang in weeks, besides from a bill collector or a solicitor or a wrong number. The first sign of anyone knowing what has happened to us might be when the neighbor down the hall or across the street smells the reek of decaying flesh. And we wonder how many people will even show up to the funeral. And what will they have to say about us? And we envision life going on without us as if nothing much even occurred. You see, brothers, when you operate in this state of solitude, as many of us do, no one really knows about the sleepless nights of dealing with your problems all on your own, not having a support system. The times when you had to call the suicide prevention hotline. You didn't have anyone to turn to when you had to face the issue with that woman who did you in. That job loss that led to your entire savings being depleted. Wondering where you're going to get your next meal, and too proud to ask for help. No one was there for you when that friend of 10 years or more betrayed you, like a Judas Iscariot, over a small gain, thinking nothing much of you as a friend after all those years. No one really knows about the health scare that you have or the health concern that you have right now. Knowing that you should get a few things checked out. And the thought of the bad news in and of itself makes you want to avoid even knowing the truth. So no one's there for you when you're facing eviction because of falling behind a few months on the rent. No one sees your heart of anger to seek revenge on those who infringed on the livelihood of you or your loved ones, when everyone else seems to have moved on from it. But the scene still plays over and over in your mind, even after many years. What is there for the men out there who live in this state? My brothers, we will explore this. This is part 1 of A Man Apart. Stay strong.